American diplomats have begun evacuating from Israel overnight amid growing signs the US could enter the conflict with Iran. The White House now says all options are on the table, with President Trump telling reporters, "I may do it, I may not do it. Nobody knows what I'm going to do." It comes as the US prepares to deploy a third aircraft carrier toward the region, with Iran's supreme leader defying the president's calls for unconditional surrender. The Ayatollah instead declaring the battle begins. As we go to air, sirens are sounding across Tel Aviv. This is a live look at the city right now. Explosions have been heard as well. Our crew there have again headed inside to take cover in those underground bunkers that many of the buildings have. Foreign Minister Penny Wong joins us live in Canberra. Good morning to you. What is your reaction to that, the Iran Supreme Leader declaring the battle begins?
Look, the world does certainly face a dangerous moment, but our message to Iran, along with so many countries of the world, is it's time to stop any nuclear program and it's time to come to the table. We see what is occurring on the ground. We see the risk to civilians in the region. It's time for de-escalation, dialogue and diplomacy, and Iran must return to the table and it must stop any production of nuclear weapons.
OK, well, the Ayatollah saying any US strike would have serious consequences, met with irreparable harm. It doesn't feel like they're having a great chat at the moment. If Trump calls, because he's got 3 aircraft carriers streaming towards there now, if Trump calls and says, "We want Australia's help," what's your answer?
Look, we're not a central player in the Middle East. Obviously, we're a long way from this conflict, but it does affect, as you know, regional stability and global stability. It also affects Australians. And I do want to say, Nat, I really feel for the many Australians who have family, relatives in Israel and Iran and the region more broadly. And as well, of course, we are focused on those Australians who are in Israel and Iran and who have registered with us seeking consular assistance. That's my focus right now.
I'll get to those in a second, but just if the US bombs Iran to smithereens, how much of a danger is there that terrorists will then retaliate around the world?
As I said, the world faces a dangerous moment. And we know that conflict in the Middle East historically has led to instability, to security risks beyond the region. We know that. But our focus now is really twofold. First, we agree with President Trump. Nothing is too late. Iran has a choice here, and the choice should be to return to the table and engage in dialogue and diplomacy. We see the situation there, and as tough as their words might be, I think we all know the situation that they face, and it's time for them to return to the table. Obviously, in relation to the region more broadly, what we have always been concerned about is the risk of regional escalation of this conflict getting larger, spreading, the consequences for all the peoples of the region and more broadly the globe.
We've got lots of people, lots of Aussies travelling to Europe. It's, the summer's hitting. We've also got footage from airline passengers showing the missiles flying from their windows. This is frightening. Is it still safe for Australians to travel to Europe right now?
Look, we take our travel advice responsibilities really seriously, Nat, and I would say to people, really, I encourage you to read very carefully the travel advice that is provided by the government. I mean, we don't just issue it. We think very carefully. We take security advice. You might recall, we said in relation to Israel prior to this conflict, reconsider your need to travel. At the moment, certainly the region, Iran and Israel and other countries are do not travel. What I'd say in relation to broader travel, we will continue to consider the evolving situation in terms of our travel advice to all relevant countries.
OK, we're going to put that connection on our website because that's important. A lot of Australians will need that information right now. Let's talk about Anthony Albanese and Trump. Our Prime Minister now eyeing off a trip to the Netherlands next week with hopes he might be able to line up a second date with Donald Trump. That's after the President stood him up in Canada. Is the PM going to kind of chase him around the world?
Can I just put a bit of perspective here, Nat? The President left the G7 because of the war in the Middle East. Now, I know we all want to think it's about us, but he left the G7 because of the war in the Middle East, and he was unable, as a consequence, not only to not have a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister, but with Prime Minister Modi, with the President of South Korea. So, just to put the facts on the table. In relation to NATO, the Prime Minister said before he left the G7 he was considering whether he would attend. The world is an unstable place at the moment. I think, the conversation you and I have just had demonstrates that. It really is a time for us to be working with other countries on how we can assure peace, stability and security for our people. Now, obviously, that's a matter for the Prime Minister. He's considering that. But the perspective is, what do we have to do at this time in the world? We've got a war in the Middle East and we have a war in Europe.
We have now, but there have been calls for many months. Trump was in November and many of the leaders lined up and went to that White House earlier in the year. You were at the inauguration yourself in January, and there were calls for our Prime Minister to go and meet him much earlier than this.
The Prime Minister has had 3 very constructive calls with the President.
But no meeting.
As you know, a meeting was scheduled. It wasn't able to happen because of the Middle East conflict. I'm sure the Prime Minister. I'm sure that a meeting will be arranged. We look forward to it. But I think the perspective we need to remember is what is happening in the world right now.
Yeah, right now it is. Now, before you go, police in Bali have arrested 3 Australians in connection with that fatal shooting incident at the luxury villa. If guilty, they could face the death penalty. Have you spoken with the Indonesian authorities about this one?
No, I've not yet engaged on this issue, and obviously we do respect the legal processes that occur in Indonesia in relation to the death penalty more generally, and obviously this matter has a long way to go, but I would just say Australia always opposes the death penalty in all circumstances and for all people. That is always what we do in all our diplomacy across the world. When Australians are facing that, that is the consistent position any Australian government advocates.
Penny Wong, thank you for your time this morning.
Great to be with you, Nat. Thank you.